This episode is brought to you by the GG button. Hit that GG button to call out a good game or to troll your friends. Order yours today at ggbutton.com and use our coupon code 1PVS2P at checkout to save 10% off your order. Again, go to ggbutton.com, use coupon code 1PVS2P at checkout, and save 10%.
Thanks to our friends at the GG button for supporting our podcast, and thanks to our listeners for supporting us.
Eurogamer reports more Nintendo NX details. We Happy Few brings us joy in early access. And will Sonic Mania revive the Sonic franchise? All that plus this week's new game releases, announcements, and more. It's Thursday, July 28th, 2016. You're listening to the 1P versus 2P podcast. I'm Taylor Ray. With me, as always, is my brother and co-host Ryan Ray. Let's start off with
First Attack.
The top stories in gaming, or I should say, the top story in gaming from this past week. It's all about the Nintendo NX. So one of the very few really trustworthy sources out there to report on a lot of these industry rumors. We have to add Eurogamer to this list because they have a lot of insider sources detailing a lot more stuff about what the Nintendo NX is going to be. And apparently, it's going to be this portable handheld console with detachable controllers. They're claiming that a number of anonymous sources have confirmed to Eurogamer about this whole thing. It's going to be this high-powered handheld console, sort of a tablet display, with joysticks and maybe directional pads and additional buttons off to the left and right. So it seems to be this move by Nintendo moving away from a dedicated home console that is permanently connected to your TV, and now is supposed to be this more of a portable solution, it seems like. So rumors have been swirling sort of about Nintendo NX before. We've talked about it on the show. It seems more and more likely what we're going to expect out of Nintendo to announce later this year. Ryan, what do you even make about all these new details that have surfaced?
This seems like just a confirmation of all of the things that have been kind of in the rumor mill for a while. Of course, Kotaku, a few other places, Wired, have confirmed the Eurogamer reports. Digital Foundry, which actually is partially owned by Eurogamer, actually did a technical report and basically said that the rumored NVIDIA Tegra processor that is supposed to be included in the NX. This Tegra processor has been included in devices like the NVIDIA Shield. They're not sure if this is a new version of that same processor or if this is an old version that they're kind of dressing up for Nintendo. That's the part of this rumor that's kind of the most suspect. But supposedly that this processor is going to allow the NX to dock into potentially a docking station, or somehow it's not, this console isn't just going to be a handheld console. You're going to be able to connect it to your TV and have gaming on the big screen. And, this dock station is allegedly the brain of the NX. The handheld is just basically for on the go.
Yeah, on top of being this sort of hybrid handheld home console that can connect to a TV, or you can take it on the go, the games are actually going to be run off of cartridges, so Nintendo's sort of going back to the well for that. They're not going to be on discs, and it's not going to be an exclusive digital system as well. So very interesting, kind of a surprise here that we haven't seen cartridges in a while. I mean, if you're thinking about consoles, we're thinking of dedicated pieces of hardware where you're either inserting discs or just downloading stuff digitally for a long time now, for the past 2 generations. And when we think about cartridges, we think about, like the DS, the 3DS, going back to Super Nintendo, Genesis, all that. And it's just very, very interesting that Nintendo is sort of deciding that, this is probably the best way for us to protect ourselves against piracy. So I'm sure that's why they're making this move. Again, these are all details that are being confirmed by anonymous sources. Nintendo they would not confirm this report, and they haven't officially announced anything yet. We're expecting them to say something actually in September, because the NX is supposed to be released, I believe, by March of next year. So coming up very, very, very soon. But very, very cool, sort of interesting details that we're seeing, the sort of next evolution, what Nintendo plans to do moving forward. Is this going to replace their 3DS? Really, really, really interesting stuff here.
I actually think that this is probably the successor to the 3DS. I think from a sales perspective, the Wii U has been kind of a commercial failure, despite the fact that it has some good games on there. I was reading some opinion on this on Kotaku, and basically the Wii U has 39 Nintendo mainline games and somewhere around 50 or so third-party games. That's not very many. This is just physical retail copies. This is not including eShop titles. That's not very many for a console that's basically been out for 4 or 5 years now. Nintendo hasn't been successful in the home console market really since the N64. You can make the case for the GameCube, but I think the GameCube.
No, wait a minute. You're completely ignoring the Wii. Come on now. I mean, that was hugely successful.
I think the Wii, the hardware was successful. I don't think a lot of the Wii's games after Wii Sports were super successful. The Wii was kind of if you think of the more recent Pokemon Go phenomenon, the Wii was definitely that. Every other day you were turning on the news and you were seeing a different senior citizens home playing Wii Sports. It was the thing that everybody was playing, only got more aggravated as more press coverage came out and more people were buying the console. But then I don't think a lot of people really explored the titles of the Wii games besides people who were in kind of Nintendo's already hardcore fan base. And when they released the Wii U, they were trying to piggyback off of the success of the Wii, and it didn't really pan out because the Wii, one of the strengths of the Wii was its simple control scheme, right? The controller was basically like a TV remote that was a very easy analog for people to understand. And then all of a sudden you had this second screen experience with the Wii U, and it resembled a second screen, but also a regular controller. And you could put a regular game controller in the hands of a normal person, and there's too many buttons. They don't understand what's going on. And that's kind of where Nintendo went kind of south on this. And basically the last few Wii U titles that are coming out this year, that's going to be it. I think maybe one of the last big titles this year is going to be that Paper Mario Color Splash game, and that's it. For the NX, we do know that that Zelda Breath of the Wild game is going to be a launch title. It's also coming to the Wii U. We'll see if there are different differences in those two different versions of the game, but basically, I think most people are going to be buying the NX to play a Zelda, and if it's true that this NX is a handheld home console hybrid, imagine a full console-length Zelda on the go. We haven't seen a Zelda game like that basically since Zelda Oracle of Seasons, Oracle of Ages, potentially Zelda Adventures DX on the Game Boy Color. There were some other Zelda games, the Spirit Tracks and some of those other DS titles, but none as successful as those original Game Boy titles. And Zelda is one of Nintendo's biggest franchises, and I think it's a smart move for them to pair it with the launch of a new console that they're really taking a risk on, don't you think?
Yeah, certainly, but back to the whole Zelda point, I think I totally disagree with you on that, because I think for the 3DS specifically, A Link Between Worlds was a huge success, both critically, commercially. Also, the ports at launch like Ocarina of Time and then later Majora's Mask on 3DS, I think were still extremely, extremely popular for the Zelda franchise. Still, Zelda holds a lot of weight. Nintendo featured it very, very, very heavily at E3 for the Wii U version. They did not show off anything for the NX, so it remains to be seen what will be the major differences between the two versions. Zelda just brings in a ton of people, and I think it is a big enough franchise that is going to convince Nintendo fans to buy this NX out of the gate. Now, that being said, I think what's key here is the fact that Nintendo hasn't announced a price point. If they're trying to sell this thing as this hybrid home console, but on this Go thing where, are there going to be performance issues? Is there going to be a significant advantage between playing this at home or on the go? And what's going to be the cost of this? Because if it's anywhere near like a PS4 or an Xbox One, people are going to point at like the comparisons, looking at the feature sets, talking and comparing that against the actual overall cost of this thing, and they're going to say, why would you buy this and not not enjoy like the more feature heavy, the better graphics, better performance out of the Xbox One, PS4 that seem to have a lot more potential. So, it's hard to say whether or not Nintendo is going to compete in that space, but absolutely the internet is going to be arguing whether or not it's worth it, right?
I have to disagree with you on that point. I don't think Nintendo has been in the business of competing strictly with its more performance heavy console competition. Nintendo has never been about pure power. They get blood out of stones, as I've heard some commentators say. The reason you come to Nintendo consoles and Nintendo games is because their IP is such a part of the gaming tapestry at this point that, like when Super Mario Maker came out, like that game was super successful because Super Mario Brothers is kind of like one of gaming's basic languages. Everybody understands how Mario jumps, how Goombas and Super Mushrooms and all that stuff works. It's been plastered on t-shirts for years. I think the NX is kind of an effort to try to bring together two different audiences that Nintendo has long tried to serve, both their newer audiences who are more used to newer franchises like Splatoon, Pikmin, people who have been kind of brought in maybe in the past 5 to 10 years. And then it's older, it's customers that have been with them forever, since the original Super Mario Brothers, since Donkey Kong, since the NES days. And, it's been harder to kind of serve those people more because they always re-release their older titles and then they ask you for $5 for another $5, another $10, another $20 for another re-release
stuff, yeah.
For another virtual console stuff. And, who knows if the NX is eventually going to bring all this Nintendo account stuff all together so that I don't have to buy yet another version of Link to the Past or Pokemon or all these games that I really, really enjoy from Nintendo's past, but I'm just sick and tired of rebuying over and over again. I think Nintendo has kind of given up the home console market. Like I said earlier, the last commercially and widely popular home console that Nintendo sold was the N64. That was, in my opinion, that was kind of their last really big thing that everybody was really talking about. I think on the portable home front, of course, the 3DS, the DS family has been super successful. But I think if you view anything after the N64 as like super successful, I think you're really deceiving yourself.
I don't know about that. I mean, we talked about how the Wii itself was just in the cultural zeitgeist. It had a ton of coverage. It was super, super commercially successful for Nintendo. If you're talking about the quality of games, the volume of games, first-party titles, and third-party titles, overall, I think you're right. The library in itself, Nintendo 64, was very, very, very strong for home consoles, but you can't discount like the major titles like Super Smash, Melee for the GameCube. Nintendo Wii had a couple of killer apps, but mostly first party, and you can't discount the success of Wii Sports. But it's hard to say what the Nintendo NX, going back to this, is that all we know at this point is that we're getting Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and that's it so far. So I think we still have to sort of stay tuned until they formally announce something, because if you look back at what they did with the Wii U marketing, okay, back then, it was just abysmal. Even just talking about the name of the Wii U confused a lot of people. Parents were just confused, like, can I play my Wii games on this? Is this the same system? Is this a small upgrade? I think there was very, very, very poor messaging on Nintendo's part when the Wii U launched, and it's still been like a really, really, really terrible console. If you just look at like the library itself, it's just really, really, really dry bones at this point. So I think they just have to abandon it altogether, start over from scratch. Very interesting that this is like this new hybrid thing. And if you're curious about sort of the mock-ups and the diagrams of what Eurogamer has confirmed, they're very interesting. We're going to link to that article in the show notes. And if you can picture, if you already know what an NVIDIA Shield looks like, it's a sort of a bigger tablet. We're not sure how many inches it is. The details didn't mention that in this Eurogamer piece. But 2 detachable controllers, fairly small, off to the sides. Imagine sort of the joysticks and D-pads and normal buttons you are familiar with the 3DS, and that's what these mock-ups are showing. So really cool. We'll have to stay tuned and pay attention to more of this news from Nintendo coming this September about the NX release next year.
We should also say that there was a follow-up Wall Street Journal story that kind of went over Nintendo's financial state. But in this Wall Street Journal article, they also reported that on top of the NX being a hybrid console, they also said that it's, according to their sources, the NX will also be able to run Nintendo's upcoming smartphone games. Again, connecting another story we talked about earlier this year, Nintendo is planning at least the first two smartphone titles they're planning on bringing. They're planning on bringing some kind of Animal Crossing game and also a Fire Emblem type game. They've said that those are coming to smartphones, iOS, and Android. But supposedly the NX is also going to be running versions of those games on the NX. We'll have to see what that means. Does that mean that the NX is basically running a version of Android? Is it running a version of iOS? Who's to say? I think the other quick thing I'll say before we leave this topic is that, as a lot of other commentators have said, Nintendo is right now in a space where it's trying to compete with smartphones. When we're talking about competing with the 3DS, they're not in competition with the Vita. The Vita is basically dead. And the problem is, even if they're not playing Pokemon Go, a lot more people are carrying smartphones. A lot more people are playing mobile games, Candy Crush, that kind of thing. And Nintendo is trying to fight for that attention space. They're trying to fight for the 5 minutes at the bus stop. The people who are commuting, they're trying to take the place of the Kindle. They're trying to get that people back in for a portable experience. And Wired's Chris Kohler actually argued that Nintendo has kind of already lost this battle. The NX is kind of the best move that they can do at this point, trying to get some part of that market. But whatever the NX ends up being, I would say it's probably the most exciting and the best move Nintendo could do, given the constraints that they have. Nintendo in its most dire state is always the most interesting times for Nintendo, and hopefully we'll see cool new games. Hopefully this hardware will be super exciting. Hopefully people will be really behind it, because I don't want Nintendo to leave the gaming space. It's just the grandfather of all of them, and always been family friendly. I would like to introduce my kids someday to Nintendo games, and I don't want them to go away.
I don't think anybody does, but I think the concern for a long time has been, are they going to stop putting out hardware? Are they going to start licensing out their first-party characters, their franchises? Are they just going to work purely on software development, putting out games instead, perhaps on other platforms? And it seems like, no, they're not ready to do that yet. But they're also not going to compete in that old traditional console space. They're not going to compete directly with Sony and Microsoft. They're not going to compete specifically with the PS4 and Xbox One. We like to put new hardware, new consoles in these boxes to say, this is the next generation, and these are going to compete with each other. And I think we're entering a new space where that's not going to be the case. Hardware is different. VR is different. PC gaming is very, very different. Mobile gaming, smartphone gaming, is taking over. Our handheld's going to be relevant anymore. We've seen Sony abandon the Vita. Nintendo sort of struggling to support the 3DS. So, all of this, these storms have sort of culminated in a very, very, very interesting situation for Nintendo that I'm sure they've been planning for years in the making. And when the official details come out from Nintendo in September, we'll see if everything here that we're talking about on this episode are confirmed about this. All right, let's move on to this week's new game releases.
I love new releases.
Starting off with a very, very bizarre Metroidvania title called Headlander. This is developed by Double Fine and published by Adult Swim Games, both of them very well known for putting out very, very eclectic titles. Ryan, have you checked it out yet?
I haven't, but I have heard some good reviews about this stuff. So Headlander is this game that has you playing as a disembodied head, taking over bodies to navigate through a kind of retro sci-fi world. Like you said, in a Metroidvania-like way, you're solving door puzzles, you're shooting your head from body to body, moving around. And there's some aspects of this game that kind of look like a bullet hell type of game. It's a very weird title, something you would definitely expect to see from these two companies. Double Fine, of course, known for Psychonauts, trenched,
stacking,
a lot of kind of quirky out there games. Adult Swim Games, of course, also known for quirky titles, games like the very, very funny Jazz Punk, kind of like this retro sci-fi aesthetic when it's put into games. And it sounds very neat. I like Metroidvania style games, so I'm definitely excited to check it out.
Yeah, it's got this psychedelic 60s, 70s sort of vibe to it. Some light combat, some platforming in there for a Metroidvania game. Heavy exploration, but just such a neat concept, a new take on this sort of thing, because the visuals of this game are very, very, very cool, very colorful. Love it. Moving on to, this is actually not a new release, it's a re-release. Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1 and 2 coming to PS4, Xbox One, and PC. Actually, they're already out this week. You can buy the two games together for $60, or if you just want to buy one of them individually, they're $40 each. But sort of early reports on these ports' quality is that they have not been good, especially on PC. Some major performance issues. There are less video options, some controller input issues, and some audio problems, which, first of all, we have to address the fact that two of these older titles from the last generation, $60, despite them being some of the best Marvel games out there, for a beat 'em up, I mean, $60, that's asking for a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And from the Kotaku comments on this story, I just want to read you this quote from this user. User Antipathis said, "So Activision is basically doing the same thing with this that they did with their prototype collection. They're just crapping out an overly expensive quick port." And the reporter who actually wrote the story up on Kotaku, Mike Fahey, said, "Yeah, that's a fair comparison." Activision has this kind of mixed history of kind of just stealthily dropping re-releases of games, trying to cash in on its old library of franchises. And it's really too bad, because I think at least the first Marvel Ultimate Alliance was a really incredible game from the 360 PS3 era. A superhero beat 'em up where you could kind of team up with different heroes. They had kind of different character classes. It was a very like Diablo style dungeon crawler sort of. Very, very cool game. I think now, if you want that kind of game, a more modern take would be kind of the Marvel Heroes game that became kind of free to play. Unfortunately, Marvel Ultimate Alliance was kind of surpassed a long time ago, and there really hasn't been anything like it since then. And it's too bad that Activision did a really shoddy job on this port.
Well, on top of that, it's just that the fact that if you remember, like Microsoft had this exclusivity deal with Activision, that they had new DLC characters. There was this gold edition that came out that had actually some of my favorite characters available, like Doctor Doom. And on this port, the DLC characters for Marvel Ultimate Alliance, they're missing from PS4 and PC this time around. So, it's been 10 years since they were originally released. It's just very, very, very weird that if they're charging this much, $60 for both games, they're not going to include all the DLC, all the characters all at once. It's just a shame. It's for a great, great Marvel title like Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1. 2 wasn't as good, but still as beat-ups and co-op multiplayer games, very, 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 very fun, and it's just kind of unfortunate. And last but not least, we have a new game. This is actually just an early access title now, not a full release, but still been hyped for a while, featured at E3 as well. We Happy Few. This is a survival game set in an alternate 1960s Britain. It's going for sort of this BioShock vibe to it. Very, very eerie and creepy first-person adventure game.
Yeah, the word on the street is that there's basically no main story in the game right now, just a bunch of side quests to complete. And although I would classify the art style as BioShock-like, this is actually a survival game, a survival roguelike, which is kind of weird if you think about a BioShock-style game that's kind of a survival roguelike game. The world is basically procedurally generated. There are stealth and combat mechanics. Also, the survival aspect of it, you're going to kind of be juggling hunger, thirst, and sleep meters. And it looks very interesting. It seems to be very short at the moment. They're saying that this game is going to be in early access for probably about 6 months to a year until it's fully developed. They're looking for some feedback from the community. Unfortunately, right now the version that they have out on early access also has some pretty game-breaking bugs at the moment, including some bugged items and some unintentionally repeating dialogue, which is sounds pretty bad. But this game was really hyped up. I am super excited to check it out. I really liked the BioShock games, and if you tell me that there's a game like that's kind of done in this like 1960s, almost Austin Powers-esque kind of style, that seems to be going after the BioShock. Like not everything is as it seems.
Kind of dystopic, like retro-futuristic, the kind of thing.
The retro-futuristic. Everybody else is on drugs and trying to actively attack you. Like that has an appeal, and I think a lot of people are going to be super interested in this game. Hopefully, they pull it out. And when it comes to a full release outside of early access, it'll be a better game.
Yeah, this game was originally kickstarted for now on PC, but we're expecting an Xbox One version as well. Visually, very, 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 very cool. So we'll have to stay tuned for when it's officially released. And now, moving on to this week's new video game announcements.
Here comes a new challenger!
Biggest one has to be this Sonic Mania news, this brand new Sonic game that was announced during San Diego Comic-Con. It was a live stream that Sega was hosting to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Sonic franchise. And it seems to be going back to Sonic's original roots. This is there was a gameplay trailer that was very, very cool, I thought. It's had that sort of same gameplay as Sonic 1 through 3. And it just had a few more updated visuals, new soundtracks. Sonic looks slightly different, but the gameplay is there. This is definitely a throwback, returning to its roots, which is something that Sonic fans have really been clamoring for a while now.
Right. So helping Sega build this thing is Sonic fan game creator Christian Whitehead. He also did some work. He and his studio actually did some work on that Sonic CD port that came out maybe a year or two ago. That kind of got spread to PC, iOS, and Android. And it was actually a pretty good port of Sonic CD, and proved that he had the chops to come together and bring Sonic back to its retro roots. I think Sonic fans have been kind of in this weird trap where basically everything after Sonic and Knuckles has basically been Sonic games have been kind of bad. Maybe the least bad of those was probably Sonic All-Stars Racing, which is not even a true Sonic game. Sonic Generations, which was kind of this marriage, and we'll get back to Sonic Generations actually back in a little bit. But these games haven't been good for a while, and I think Sonic didn't really survive the transition to 3D as other platforming franchises did, like Mario. And, there was some success in Sonic Adventure that was super popular on the Dreamcast, but then kind of, it got kind of mishmashed. There were a bunch of new, really crappy characters that were introduced in the Sonic universe. And then on top of it, the gameplay, Sonic is supposed to be all about this character that really speeds through levels. And a lot of the games have been about slowing Sonic down. And that hasn't been super fun. So I think they're going to try to go for old school Sonic fans with this new Sonic Mania. Hopefully they're successful.
Yeah, it's coming out actually at holiday next year. It's arriving for PS4, Xbox One, and PC. So watch out for Sonic Mania next year because, that Sega, that Sonic fan base, man, they look for anything to cling on to. I mean, I don't think either of us are true, really huge Sonic fans, but you have to admit, those older games up until Sonic and Knuckles, really, really, really fun, great platformers, and the rest are kind of forgettable. I agree with you there.
Well, speaking of Sonic titles that aren't forgettable, I'm bringing these back to Sonic Generations. There was another Sonic game announcement during this live stream. They're calling this Project Sonic 2017. It's going to be starring old and new Sonic. It's due out holiday of next year also. But basically, from what it looks like, it's a sequel to Sonic Generations. Again, generally thought to be one of the better Sonic games in recent years. If you've played Sonic Generations, you kind of switch back and forth between old Sonic and more modern Sonic between different movesets. The levels were kind of Also inspired by that, if you played as old Sonic, the levels were more based on the Genesis games. If you played as new Sonic, you kind of played the more kind of like auto-targeting spin dash kind of games where you would rail grind, and it was more like
it was a 3D space as opposed to like a side-scrolling 2D, right?
Right. And basically they're trying to appeal to both audiences here. Sonic Generations I think was a really neat idea that wasn't really fully fleshed out, and I'm glad to see them revisiting it. Hopefully that means it's a good Sonic game. We've had our hopes up with that Sonic the Hedgehog 4, which was released in 2 episodes, and they said they were going to do a third one, and then they didn't. And on top of it, the 2 episodes they did release were terrible. They did not control very well. The gameplay was not reminiscent of the old Sonic games. It was just a bad scene altogether. I think Sonic, unlike the best comparison I can make is probably the Mega Man franchise, because I think Capcom has kind of had also a mixed bag with Mega Man releases kind of after Mega Man 7. They had some success with Mega Man X, Mega Man Battle Network, and then Capcom went back to the well with Mega Man 9 and 10. I think Sonic and Sonic Team and Sega has had this hard time trying to translate Sonic's kind of old school appeal to new school success, and the Sonic games just not have fared well at all. So hopefully they can bring it back.
And I want to correct myself earlier. So Sonic Mania is actually coming out spring of next year, and this Project Sonic 2017, which is basically Sonic Generations 2, is coming out holiday of next year. So just a little bit of clarification there. All right, moving on to Square Enix making a JRPG for Apple Watch called Cosmos Rings. This is continuation of this Square Enix series that they've been working on smartphones for a while, RPG games called Chaos Rings. And kind of interesting that they're developing a spin-off that's exclusive to the Apple Watch.
Right. I don't know how many people out there have an Apple Watch. I don't know how many people are looking to play games on Apple Watch. The Apple Watch doesn't have great battery life. And when Square Enix releases these big RPGs on mobile platforms, they tend to be battery eaters on phones. And I can't imagine on the Apple Watch hardware that not also being a performance hog and a battery eater also. I actually have played one of the Chaos Rings games. It wasn't that bad for a mobile RPG. I wouldn't say it's as fully featured as a Final Fantasy game, but it kind of does the trick. What's been kind of disappointing about Square Enix's output on mobile is that it's either goes the really bad free-to-play route, or they release their older titles and then price them out at like $30, which in the mobile market is a huge no-no.
Right.
Like I will pay any price to play Final Fantasy VII wherever I can, but I am not paying $30 to play another version of Final Fantasy Tactics on my phone. Like, come on, man. Like that's ridiculous.
Yeah, and some of the ports have been really, really bad too, control-wise, and a lot of bugs in there too. So I look at the reviews on some of these things. I'm like, oh wow, this is like a $20 game on mobile. Oh, this is like an older port. All right, I'll check it out. But then I look at the price tag. I look at the reviews. I'm like, what? Why is it even worth it? So I don't know. I never played any of the Chaos Ring games. That's sort of a newer franchise, but this Cosmos Rings, we don't know too much about it beyond that it's going to be an Apple Watch exclusive game. It's a JRPG. Square Enix is developing it. It's coming out later this summer, and that's about it. We don't know what it's going to play like. Kind of weird, but thought we'd talk about it because it's sort of this weird new announcement they're putting out there.
All right, let's talk about a new game in a franchise that you really like, Taylor. Level 5 is bringing Lady Layton, The Conspiracy of King Millionaire Ariadne, to mobile consoles, Android, iOS, and 3DS. They're first bringing it to Japan next year, but Wired's Chris Kohler actually follow up with Level 5's USA branch and confirmed that this game is also going to be coming to the US around the same time next year. How excited are you for a new Layton game?
Very, very interested. I love the Layton series. I've played every single one up to this point, and I like that they're putting this out on mobile. I think it's very, very smart for them to do that. And also very, very interesting. I believe that Lady Layton is actually supposed to be the daughter of Professor Layton, so they're introducing new characters in this franchise. I just love these sort of like story-rich puzzle mysteries, and just Professor Layton just really did the trick for me. And I thought one of the best in the series was Phoenix Wright versus Professor Layton, just a fantastic crossover title, blending the two gameplay, very, very iconic gameplay styles together. So very interesting. I like what they're doing here. And Professor Layton, it just seems like he's a very, very popular character in Japan. And I like that they're introducing something new, having a female protagonist headline the next game in the series. So very, very, very proud of Level 5 for doing this. Very excited to check that out eventually when it comes to the US next year.
All right, let's talk about our last game announcement. Yakuza 0. Sega announced the release date for Yakuza 0 in North America and Europe. This is going to be a PS4 exclusive title. It's going to be released in both regions on January 24th of next year. It's going to be available both physically and digitally. It's a prequel to the rest of the series, and it's set in a district of Tokyo in December 1988. If you've played the Yakuza games, you know that they're kind of over the top, very stereotypically Japanese, following the story of this guy who kind of enters the Japanese mafia known as the Yakuza, and kind of follows his story as he rises through the ranks. They're just these kind of like really crazy. It's kind of, the Yakuza games have kind of really embodied the spirit of like 90s import games that you don't really see anymore. It's just wacky fun. It has these kinds of really story-driven moments, also intercut with these like beat 'em up boss battles, like just insane, over the top, very colorful. The last game, Yakuza 5, had basically a fantastic side quest where you drive as a taxi driver, and basically the taxi cab is doing like these like anime style moves. It's totally insane. And I actually think you should check it out if you have PS Plus. Sony announced that they are bringing Yakuza 5 to that thing, so you have no excuse. You should play Yakuza 5 just to bring yourself into the fold with the Yakuza games. I highly recommend them. And on top of it, Yakuza 5, if you're interested in the story, also has a cool feature where it kind of summarizes the last few Yakuza games in text, if you want to read up on the story. A very, very cool franchise, and I'm glad that Sega is bringing Yakuza 0 next year to both the US and Europe.
Very, very, very wacky third-person action brawler. I've never played any of the Yakuza games, but this one just seems appealing, and coming so soon. You know, usually they announce these games in Japan very quickly, and they either don't bring them over here to the US and Europe, but I think Yakuza has been one of the ones that's been pretty successful for Sony very, very recently. So releasing in both North America and Europe, January 24th. Very cool. Check that out then. That about wraps it up for this week's episode. Let's go to the bonus stage. Ryan, you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Companies Analog and 8-Bit Do announced a new Super Nintendo Bluetooth adapter for wireless controllers. It's priced at $25 at play-asia.com. The retro receiver works with your original SNES, Super Famicom, and even aftermarket systems like the Retron 5 that share the same controller port for the Super Nintendo. So that includes the PS4's DualShock 4, PS3 DualShock 3, Nintendo Wiimote, and Wii U Pro controller all can connect to this Bluetooth receiver.
You know, we've gotten so used to wireless controllers in our modern gaming age, and the SNES never really officially supported that wireless standard. Hopefully there's no input lag, because that's always something that's notoriously killed peripherals like this. A Target shopper has found a batch of new exclusive tabletop games and posted pictures straight to Reddit. One of them is an Oregon Trail themed card game. The game's maker, Pressman Toy Company, says the Oregon Trail card game is leaning heavily on the original 1974 computer classic, with a faithful interpretation including cards for food, water, bullets, and oxen to start your journey. Target says that the card game will be sold widely at their stores very soon, starting August 1st.
The card game can't possibly be as fun as that classic edutainment video game, but never has typhoid, measles, and dysentery been so family-friendly. Valve is adding VR support for Dota 2, but albeit in a spectator mode. Valve's blog reads, quote, "Put on a headset to watch live matches or replays in Dota VR Theater. Immerse yourself further by jumping through the minimap into the game itself. Watch from a bird's eye view, or plant your feet on the ground to watch the battles rage around you at full scale."
You know, Valve has been supporting Dota 2 for a very long time at this point. They've been adding new ways to spectate matches for a while now. And if you're still playing the game, you're likely to have watched the International Esports Tournament. Good on Valve for supporting Dota 2 in VR.
Agreed. All right, that's it. If you liked our show, please subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes and Stitcher. Please let us know what you think of our show.
You can also listen to us on Google Play Music, TuneIn, Clamor, or our site, which is 1pvs2p.com, or search for us using your favorite podcast app. Our sources for this week's stories have been posted at the link in the show notes.
Like our Facebook page, follow us on Twitter at 1pvs2p_podcast. As always, we want to thank Phonetic Hero for the use of the songs for our show. Coffee Stomp and Super Manly Brothers X, both of those songs are part of the compilation project Chiptunes Equals Win.
Thanks for listening, everybody. We will see you next time.